Good evening, and welcome to Going Deeper, here Thursday night on the river. I'm Daniel Simons, priest at St. Paul's Church in Norwalk, and tonight's panel, I'm joined by Gail-Bindley Taylor from the parish, and Javier, also from the parish, my husband. We are talking tonight about not just flags. I wrote about that in my reflection last week, but ways that we identify, ways that we claim identity, ways that we identify others. Flags are strong symbols. They can trigger us, and I believe they can lead us deeper into common bonds, and certainly tonight into conversation. That's the goal, is to let whatever comes up from this conversation lead us into a way of knowing each other better. Tonight, none of us three on the screen are experts, but we hope to be catalysts so that we lead into a larger conversation. And it doesn't just end tonight. We're recording and putting a link up later, so this can be a conversation that goes on. The reason I was writing about flags, and we're talking about it tonight, is that we're in a season of flags. We just celebrated the Stonewall riots 51 years ago, Pride this last Sunday, and we're in the thick of so much discovery and learning around this chapter of Black Lives Matter and work for equal justice and an end to mass incarceration, all the attached movements. And we're on the cusp of July 4th, independence. So as we are in this cluster of multiple identities and all that kicks up, tonight what our goal is that all of us, panelists and folks online, will just notice different points of view expressed, notice different points of view from your own, discover that your own point of view might be shifting, and celebrate that. That we have diverse interdependence, that's what we're headed toward, or swimming in. So tonight, I'm actually going to join the panel. I'm jumping in myself, and so I've asked Jake to referee it. So I'll shut up now. Except to outline what we're doing, we're going to go for the hour, and we'll divide that into 20 minutes of interchange among the three of us, then break it out into small groups and answer some questions that I'll pose later on, and go for a max of 70 minutes, so 10 past 8, if you can stay that long. And for now, as we continue, just notice what you notice. Pay attention to the triggers. You may want to take notes just on yourself, and let that be something we step into with curiosity. So over to you, Jake. I'm gonna mute myself and listen in.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm actually just gonna toss a question right to you because you recently sent out a statement to, or a reflection rather, in the newsletter, and you talked about 3 different flags, and you just mentioned them. You talked about the American flag, you talked about the Progress flag, which some people might not know. It's the traditional pride flag with a rainbow with new stripes on it. It has white, pink, and blue to represent trans and non-binary rights, and then it has brown and black stripes to represent LGBTQ people of color. So that's kind of like a new take on a familiar flag that's entering the consciousness more, I think. And then you mentioned Black Lives Matter, which is kind of like the hot topic flag right now, and that's really the most divisive. They all have, of course, arguments and commentary, but that's the one that's really on the cutting edge right now. So how do you, as a leader at St. Paul's, and and in your own thoughts, what do you see as kind of the tensions there and the struggles in choosing what flag to fly?
Oh, well, I can't remember who I said to the other day. I said, let's just be like a Tibetan monastery and fly them all, just add flag to flag and kind of overwhelm ourselves with identities rather than trying to pick one. Um, I think I wrote in the reflection and then edited it out. I'm tremendously ambivalent around flags because I see their power to unite and their power to create identity, which is something we all need and are going to do anyway. They signal, but um, but as a leader of a community, I'm always trying to create a further conversation, to invite people to listen uh, to their own point of view and to be able to listen to it from a couple of feet away. So inhabit their point of view solidly, but also interrogate their point of view, which often happens by listening to somebody else's point of view and having it be different than theirs. And I don't think flags necessarily preclude that, but sometimes they can short their circuit the conversation because, oh, we know what we mean. You know, if you fly that flag and I fly that flag, then we don't need to have this conversation. We can just, we know we're together and we know what this means, and this is how we march. So that's my misgiving, and I don't want to discount that. This is where tonight even I want to listen to other points of view to keep aerating that perspective.
Yeah, I think the benefit and the difficulty is that it can create a real binary of you're with this flag or you're against it, and that lets people know where you stand, but it precludes, can preclude conversation. Javier, what do you say to that? If you drive by St. Paul's and see a bunch of flags, how do you feel about how that helps you enter a conversation?
I have never been too partial to flags. I don't like flags. I never have. I come to this from the world of the arts, where for us and for me as a teacher and as an actor, as an artist, my work has always been about diversity, plurality, and inclusion. And for me, flags, while they are great tools for unity and identity in some cases, what I feel is that in the end, they mark a certain kind of exclusivity. You can only belong to this flag if. So for me right now, and I've had the same reaction to the pride flag, to the rainbow flag for many years. In the past couple of years, I would say that I've begun to look at it in a different way, simply because of the LGBTQ plus and community. I love that we continue to add letters to the community. LGBTQ, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, FBI, CIA, all of it, all the letters. To me, that is a flag that encompasses everyone or tries to be inclusive of everyone. And so I can somehow stand behind it. And even then, I'm not too keen on flags, but I understand how important flags are for some people, because it represents an identity, a struggle, and finding a bonding with other people. I do take issue when Daniel said, well, when we fly a flag, we all know what it means. Well, that's precisely the problem. An American flag can be flown in many different ways. So no, I don't think that flying the flag means we all know what it means and we have a bond. And that for me is a big issue. So I strive in my romantic, artistic imagination for a world where there are no passports and no flags, but I know that that's not going to be a reality anytime soon. So.
Yeah, I think you identify that some flags can be focused more on exclusion, whereas the pride flag, as you say, the idea, we're going to keep adding colors, and I hope it keeps getting more and more elaborate. I failed to say that the new stripes create an arrow that's pointing to the right, with the idea that that's the progress being mentioned. But yeah, I love the idea that would keep accruing colors forever and ever. So Gail, as someone who has lived in many places, presumably under a number of flags, how do you respond to that idea that some flags kind of bring people in and some flags keep people out?
I think I never really thought about it until you brought it up from the exclusionary sort of part of things. I think in large measure, because when I think of flags, I think first and foremost of my first memory of a flag that was significant. And that was when my country became independent on the 31st of August, 1962. And I wasn't even 10 yet. And I remembered my mother taking us to see the Union Jack come down and our flag go up for the first time and hear our national anthem play for the first time. And I just remember being in tears because it just felt so good. You know, I didn't have to listen to Philip and I for the umpteenth time because, you know, the Queen would give her Christmas message and we'd have to hear her Christmas message from this woman we didn't know, you know. So it was so great to see our flag, and our flag meant something because our flag is red, black, and white. And each part of that flag meant something. The white had to do with the sea that surrounds the islands, and the red had to do with the richness of the diversity of the people, you know, and of course, so did the black. The black is the earth and the agriculture and the things that come from the earth that were important. So to me, that was a huge symbol. And then later on, when I went to work at the UN, and coming from a small island and being, you know, asked to come to work at the UN was huge, you know, because they could have chosen anybody. It was one post from the entire Caribbean, and I got it. And I thought, that must be God. You know? And initially I wasn't interested because I didn't want to come here, because I didn't even see what the big deal was in coming to live here. But when I remembered walking up to that building and I looked at all these flags, and the first thing I thought of is, I want to see where my flag is. And I remembered walking the whole part of First Avenue just to find my one flag, because every morning at the UN, every flag from every country goes up. And every evening, every flag comes down. And those flags have meant different things, you know, heads of state passing away, trouble in different countries, you know, a new nation. Like, I never forget when East Timor became a nation. And East Timor had come out of a lot of blood and sweat and tears. So that for me, flags have meant more a symbol of liberation and freedom and independence, of thought, of everything. Because when we became independent, the other thing that was enriched was our own culture. You know, our writers, our culture, our music, you know, became something that was a part of the wider world that it wasn't before. So I guess for me, you know, flags have meant something different. When I look at Black Lives Matter, and that has been a more recent vintage for me, as well as the pride flag. I thought it was I didn't realize there was so many pride flags. There were like a gazillion, because initially there was each group having a flag. So to see the new flag and the fact, one of the things I read about the new flag is that it doesn't matter what angle you fly it at, you can see, you know, the way it will, the way you will see it, you can see every color. And I think that's important too. I think that says something, you know. So it says something at a time when you need something to say, to talk about. When you talk about inclusion, you want something real, and that for me is real. And the same thing we as Black Lives Matter, I think it's, you know, a flag there. It came out of struggle, and it continues to be struggle. You know, it comes out of rebellion and struggle, and so I think that in itself. And now that you have new players who are not necessarily of color coming under that flag, you know, so I see it as I can see why you can see exclusion, but I think it can be unifying at the same time.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I grew up in Massachusetts, and I would look at the Massachusetts flag, and it's just a bunch of symbols I don't understand. And you can go Google it, and you can find out what it represents, like you said, Gail, about the colors. And it makes me think about Black Lives Matter, which is kind of the flag of the moment. And there's no one definition of that. I think everybody brings their own meaning to that, from a phrase that started, I think, as something quite simple that most people would agree to in that moment, and then quickly became a huge divisive kind of statement in our culture. So I'll toss this to anybody brave. But so what do we do with a flag, kind of a live, hot flag that doesn't have a settled definition, but it's still really in motion? What does that mean for a church, like a community like ours that prides itself on being progressive and inclusive and all these things?
I would say that first, like with everything else, everything can be a tool, and that same tool can be a weapon. Every single tool can be a weapon. So I think that the most universal and important conversation we need to have is, how do we use this tool? And then we understand, and in order to have this conversation, we have to listen to everyone, and we have to be ready to listen to those who don't like the flag, who do like the flag. So what do we do? But it's crazy. Are we going to put it up on Mondays from 12 to 3, but not on Tuesdays from 4 to 5? Well, maybe. But if we truly want to be inclusive, then there is a largest conversation. I think that we have been historically lazy about inclusion. We love the meaning of inclusion, but we don't like the homework that comes with inclusion, and concepts are beautiful, but concepts are just concepts, So what do we do with the flags? That's a great question. What do we do with them? Let's have a conversation. Let's see what all of us want to be done with these flags, and let's try to represent everyone and everyone's feelings. Maybe by the end of the conversation, we realize that we actually don't need a flag. We just need to continue having the conversation.
Yeah, I do think one of the risks we're getting at is called performative allyship, when you just fly a flag, but yeah, like you say, only on Tuesdays, only when certain people are visiting the church or whatever it happens to be. And I'll return to that. I got an email from a parishioner I want to read, because she couldn't make it tonight. But any responses to Javier's comment, Daniel? Yeah, you.
We're not that far apart from each other. For me, the word conversation is where I started, and I keep circling back to it. That I am happy with provocative anything if it provokes something. If it's not about signaling something to them, but instead creating a bigger we, and provoking a deeper conversation that causes us to interrogate or investigate, be curious about each other's position and our own position. So with Black Lives Matter, I think the thing is, there's a great value in signaling. I mean, as you said, our church is one that says, these are the values we hold. Let's signal that. And then it's a deeper invitation to us to say, what does that mean for us? How does that carry us deeper into not just a movement, but the movement of our own position and point of view? As Gail, actually some movement that just happened with me was listening to you talk about the birth of your country, and then thinking about Black Lives Matter and how this is this flag that means so much to people the real statement behind Black Lives Matter is Black lives have not mattered, but they actually, that pay attention to that they've not mattered. We can't look away from that. And to have suddenly them matter because they've got, to say just that simple thing, Black Lives Matter. So then my brain jumped to the American flag, because I trigger about that. I have to say, I've had it used hostily. I've seen it, it's been a threat so many times because it's been used in a partisan way. I thought, what did that mean to those people who first, who were at, like Gail in the birth of Trinidad, and when say, oh, who are we now? What just happened? How did we just, get bigger? So, again, as long as it provokes a conversation, I think provocative is good.
So Gail, I'm going to toss this to you because you're not just here as someone who's seen a lot of flags, but you're also a member of the Race and Social Justice Coalition, which is doing a lot of the ongoing work in the community right now. So this is an email I got from a parishioner who couldn't be here tonight, but wanted to offer her 2 cents. And she says, it's just a paragraph long, but it's great. Hanging flags in support of LGBTQIA+ and BIPOC lives, BIPOC being Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So hanging those flags should be nothing less than a public announcement that we are not only a welcoming space, but that we value their voices and leadership, are responsive to their specific needs and concerns, are willing to do more than lip service to make sure they not only feel safe, but are safe, and that we fight for their interests both within the church and within the larger community. It is a commitment to doing the 24/7 year-round activism and self-amelioration necessary to fight systems of oppression and white supremacy. Gail, what do you make of that? Let's unmute you, Gail.
To remember, I was just saying it sounds like my daughter wrote that. Because that's exactly how she feels. And I have to say, I remembered about maybe 2 years ago, Peter and I were involved with this, something at the Unitarian Church, because we were looking at how do you deal with kids and sexuality in our sort of setting, and what kind of role is there for a religious instructor. And one of the first things I noticed in going to the Unitarian Church was they had a huge black Lives Matter sign. And I said to Peter, did you see that? And he was like, yeah. And for me, it meant something because while we were in there and they were teaching, the issue of Black Lives Matter was woven into what was happening at the same time. And so I relate very strongly to what that person has said, because I think it is really important from that perspective, that when you see a banner, especially in Connecticut, which is still very white, it says something to you as a person of color. It does, absolutely. So, and much as that's the other thing, a lot of the time people assume that because folks of color may not make a comment, that they're comfortable, that they're okay, and that silence does not necessarily mean I'm happy. It may mean I don't want to get into this with you, period, So I think the more open, this opens the conversation. It doesn't have to be a flag, it could be a banner. When that bench that we have that's in the rainbow colors, when that was put up, that was a conversation piece, because people didn't notice it at first. And then a couple of, people said, well, what is this? Why is this happening? But because it became a conversation piece, it brought acceptance. It brought acknowledgement, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a flag. It can be another symbol.
I so want to second that. Gail. I so agree. Symbology is very important. And a bench, what a wonderful symbol. To paint that, a bench, that's an invitation to come and stay. Sit down, have a conversation, be with other people. That's wonderful. A flag for me, and again, I'm a liberal Northern California artist, okay? So please take that into consideration. But a flag to me is that kind of symbol to which you have to pledge some kind of allegiance. And that already becomes murky for me. It's like, allegiance to whom, to what, why? I'm not so interested in the rules under which we have to behave under a flag. I'm much more interested in the principles that made that flag be there. So yeah, I'm all for banners, for objects, for signs that say you are welcome, no matter what, no matter who you are, no matter what you think of me, you are welcome here. But to me, that can be achieved in a much better and more profound way with objects and symbols than with flags, you know? So, not that I'm opinionated or anything.
That's one of the issues I have with the American flag. Because when you think, now that Trinidad accepts dual citizenship, it's different. But for me, one of the biggest painful things was thinking about taking citizenship and losing my Trinidadianness. That to me was really hard. You know, I mean, thank God by the time now that I'm ready to do that, because while you're at, that's the other thing, while I'm at the UN, I had to keep my nationality. So, you know, I've kept my flag flying in that sense, you know, but to me, giving that up, you know, and looking at what does that flag symbolize to me? You know, how does it really include me? You know, that for me is a big question. Yeah. When I look at the American flag.
Yeah. I remember I've had many different experiences with the American flag, like I'm sure every single one of us has had. But I remember this one very traumatic experience that we had with Daniel when we moved to Manhattan. We moved to Manhattan in 2008, 7 years after 9/11, and we lived right next to the ground zero where they were building the fountains and stuff. And it was within the first 2 or 3 weeks of living there, again, having moved from San Francisco, you know, peace, love, everything, that we saw these construction workers with these huge jackets and a huge American flag on the back that said in big letters, "We don't forget, we don't forgive."
I didn't forget, I won't forgive.
I didn't forget and I won't forgive, with the American flag and the American bandanas. And then as 9/11 Center was being built and it was being open, and I started seeing so many people going to the site and going to the museum with their American flags and their American bandanas and their American t-shirts. And that became a very oppressive symbol right there, what it meant to be American. And for everyone, this sense of like, of course we don't forgive. I'm like, well, how is that representative of everyone? And why should we not forgive? So again, to me, the implications of flag when it comes to nationality, I understand the need for representation or for saying, you know, but I belong, I grew up in that culture and I love that culture. But it has further, you know, much further implications that I don't know we take into consideration when we wave the flag, you know. And even, I'm sure, Gail, you know, like myself, you've gone through the naturalization process, and you have to go the day. And I found it so condescending when I got there to become an American citizen and to get my passport and stuff, that someone came with an American flag and they actually, in a jokingly way, but said, and now we're gonna teach all of you to be proud Americans and to fly the flag and to wave it. I felt so insulted. I'm like, I refuse to take part in this charade. I want the freaking passport and that's about it. But I don't have any allegiance to this flag or any flag, you know. And so I have a very allergic reaction, you know.
When you say allegiance, and I know we're gonna shift to breakout, but that to me circles us back to Jesus. You know, one of the things that is so notable about him, as well as every other wisdom teacher, is that they were always pointing to a larger allegiance, and often used the language of obedience, by which they meant listening deeply, and following from the center, so that it was, like follow your heart rather than shut up and get in line. And I think that word allegiance just resonates. However, maybe we'll talk about it more. But what do we pledge allegiance to, and why?
Well, as you mentioned allegiance, I think of two other instances of flags. And these two instances involve the UN flag. Because when you go on mission assignment, doesn't matter what nationality you are, you're under the UN flag. And, I can think of two instances, one in Baghdad when the UN was bombed and a number of our staff were killed from all over the place, and the second one was a little more recent in Haiti when the earthquake happened and a lot of our staff died there too. And I remembered when the bodies were brought back, because you had a large Brazilian contingent, for example, who were killed in Haiti. And, a lot of them, they were so badly damaged, they couldn't, they could barely salvage the bodies, so they couldn't open the caskets or anything. But to watch those people coming back to headquarters, and the big thing for them was bringing back the damaged UN flag, which flies downstairs. It's put up on the wall. We have both the flag from Baghdad and the one from Haiti that people in the middle of all that confusion rescued, because they felt it was so symbolic of the sacrifice that people were willing to make for not themselves, but for the good of the world, for the good of Haiti and the good of the world. Because when people are on mission, sometimes I was in Africa for 3.5 years. Your family's away, and mine was a non-family mission. So you don't see your family for months at a time. And there's something about that, of being part of a cause bigger than yourself, that is symbolized by that flag.
Yes, and that, again, that's beautifully put, but that's a cause. That's a principle. Yes. It's exactly. Not a territory. It's not, it's like, it's crazy. For instance, if you were to say, Gail, I am so proud to have been working for the UN or to work for the UN, I would totally understand that. But that's another thing that for me causes kind of allergy. The pride that goes with flags is so dangerous, because most of the time when we speak of pride, immediately what we do is create values. I am proud of this because this is better than. And that is so crazy, So if the flag is just a manifestation of a movement like the UN, or like the pride flag maybe, or Black Lives Matter, these are all movements that have symbols to represent them. That I'm okay. I'm not so allergic to that, Yeah.
Daniel, you're probably going to take us away in a minute, but I was just remembering, Gail, I interviewed you a couple weeks ago, and you talked about, so how do we do the work, and how do people who haven't been doing the work start doing the work? And you said basically, I am here and people like me are here, and we will meet you halfway, but you have to get there. And it just makes me think that our symbols should represent the same idea, that it is not keeping out, it's saying, listen, we're halfway there if you want to come in through the doors, and even if you want to argue about the flag, but it needs to represent somehow. That seems to be what we're describing, that we're not cutting off the conversation. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to bring people in no matter where they are. And the balance of that is what we're trying to find, because it's challenging.
No, I absolutely agree with that.
Yes. And that's such a great point, Jake, also, that, putting a pride flag, for example, or a progress flag does not mean that if you believe that homosexuality is a sin, you should not come in. If you believe that homosexuality is a sin and it shouldn't exist and God should punish it, still, please come in. Let's have the conversation.
Exactly.
So, you know, it cannot be, well, don't worry, if we see a homophobic person, we will kill them for you. That's not what the flag can mean. You know, it has to be everyone is invited. Everyone is invited.